So this is my friend Tommy. Tommy is 65 years old and lives in Liverpool with his wife. Tommy is a big football fan, supporting Everton Football Club, and he also loves to play golf in his spare time. Tommy does a lot for his community, and his family and friends love how charitable he is and also his sense of humour. Tommy also happens to have dementia. I'd like you to spend a moment to think about what the word dementia means to you. Often, the first words that come to mind are Alzheimer's, disease, memory loss, nursing homes, old age. Now, although these words can be true in some cases of dementia, they all paint a rather incomplete image of what life is like for someone living with a diagnosis. How many of you thought of these words here in green on the screen? So, 2/3 of people living with a diagnosis of dementia are living in the community, and some of them are still in full-time work. Also, some people with dementia don't have any memory problems at all, but have other cognitive difficulties, such as with decision-making or with perception. People as young as 30 can develop dementia, and there are over 42,000 younger people living with dementia in the UK. So these are people under the age of 65. So their needs will be very different from an older adult's needs. Also, dementia is an umbrella term. There are over 200 different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's disease, although it's the most common form, is just one of those types. So everyone's symptoms and situation is very different. And it's important to remember that if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. I'm here today because I'm passionate about rebooting people's attitudes of what dementia is, and also to highlight some of the small changes that we can make in the community to better support the lives of people living with dementia. So the research area that I've spent the last 5 years working on is all to do with our memories of spaces. So how we navigate and learn routes in our homes and in our towns. For example, when you first came here to Coventry, this may have been the first time that you visited the Belgrade Theatre, or actually even the first time that you visited Coventry. If you are a new visitor, I'd like you to think about how you went about getting here. Now, I suspect some of you may have followed some directions on your iPhone. Others may have followed directions on a sat-nav. I suspect a handful of you may have become a little bit lost or disorientated and asked someone for directions. I'd like you to remember that feeling of being lost, feeling vulnerable, anxious, worried that you're not going to make it to the theatre on time. Now, if you're relatively young, you're probably generally quite good at learning new routes. However, for someone living with dementia, and particularly Alzheimer's disease, learning new routes can be challenging. Spatial disorientation is one of the very first symptoms reported by people with Alzheimer's disease. And the reason for this is because the Alzheimer's disease first affects the parts of the brain responsible for encoding and storing our spatial memories. As a result, people with Alzheimer's disease first become disorientated and find it hard to learn routes in unfamiliar, new environments, but later on also in familiar environments. So today I would like to highlight 5 design considerations that you can take into account to make a more inclusive and user-friendly environment for people with dementia. My first point is avoid repetitive layouts. So in 2015, I interviewed a group of older adults living in a retirement development, all of whom had self-reported memory difficulties. I really wanted to understand their experiences of navigating and learning their environment. And it became apparent from these conversations that the main reason and cause for their disorientation was the repetitive layout and also interior finishes of the environment. This is a picture taken from the setting. And I suspect, we've all been there before, to hotels, to care homes, to hospitals, with similar pictures of flowers along the corridors, no variation in colour carpet, and a lack of landmarks and memorable spaces. And this made it challenging for the residents in this development to learn routes, and it impacted on their day-to-day tasks, such as going to the communal lounge or going and using the laundry facilities. So the main point I would like to emphasise here is to try to avoid having too much repetition. My second point relates to landmarks, so having enough unique landmarks in the environment. So one way of breaking up repetitive spaces is by including more memorable landmarks along the corridors. For a landmark to be useful, it should ideally be unique, so one of a kind. It should be salient, so it should stand out from the background. And it should also be stable, so it shouldn't move. A relatively good landmark here in Coventry would be the Lady Godiva statue. It's unique, it's stable, and it's salient, making it a good tool for navigation. My third point relates to colour, so using colour effectively. So using different colours in the environment is a very good way of both breaking up and connecting different environmental spaces. But what's more important is the difference in colour contrast between these different colours. So architects and designers, they often look at this value called the light reflectance value, which is the amount of visible and usable light that is reflected off of a surface when it is illuminated. But a very simple trick that we can do at home is by first taking a picture of your environment in colour, and then taking a second picture of your environment in black and white. And this will highlight whether or not there is enough visible colour contrast between the two colours in your environment. So, in relation to using different colours in the environment for people with dementia, if there is too little colour contrast between, say, the carpet, the walls, the sofa, someone may walk into it. Alternatively, if there is too much colour contrast between, say, the flooring and a rug, this could be perceived as a whole by someone with dementia and would obstruct movement. Okay, so my fourth point now relates to noise. So people with dementia can experience changes to their senses. So this is taste, to sense of hearing, and to smell as well. What's frequently reported by people with dementia is this increased sensitivity to noise. Even the sound of footsteps or closing a door can be distracting and overwhelming for someone with dementia. And here I have included a few quotes from people living with dementia who have emphasized the impact of noise. So here, this lady, they're taken from Dementia Diaries, by the way, which is a great platform where people with dementia share their experiences. So this quote at the top talks about how hearing is heightened in these social settings. And this one at the bottom here talks about the increased sensitivity to noise of cupboards and even dropping things. So one way that we can reduce noise is by having more soft furnishings in the environment to absorb the echoing sounds of footsteps, of wine glasses. and this will make an environment more comfortable for people with dementia to use. Also, another consideration is, especially for hospitals and care settings, most people aren't used to the noises of monitors, workstations, other residences, radios and televisions. So being mindful of this and reducing noise where possible will be beneficial. Okay, so good access to toilets. Now, this is a topic that isn't frequently talked about, but people with dementia can experience difficulties with going to the bathroom. However, if you're out and about, it can be difficult to find a toilet to use. Also, in places like hotels, signage can be minimal. And whilst there can be some signage taking you to the toilet, there's very rarely any signage taking you from the toilet back from the location that you've come from. So thinking about making toilets more accessible by having more signage, and also thinking about those points about colour contrast, making sure that there's enough colour contrast between, say, the soap dispenser and the wall and the toilet seat and the floor. So I've highlighted 5 points for you to think about and how you can make a more dementia-inclusive environment. But as well as reading these points and thinking about these points, what's more important is that if you are going to make changes to the environment, that you talk directly to people with dementia to get their input, because they may be able to highlight areas of your space which are problematic that you haven't even considered, but they may also be able to highlight things that are working really well. Remember, if you've met one person with dementia, then you've met one person with dementia. So, what kind of spaces do you think should be dementia-friendly? So, here are a few that I've come up with. Now, whilst these suggestions that I've made today have been thought about and implemented in many dementia specialist environments, such as care homes and hospitals, they've less frequently been implemented in environments used by everyone. But if we want people with dementia to continue living independently for as long as possible, these sorts of environments should be thinking about these design changes. What can we do as a community to better support the 850,000 people living with dementia in the UK? We can start by shifting our perceptions of what we think life should be like and what life is like for people with dementia. We can start to recognise ways to make changes to the environment to compensate for the decreasing abilities that people may have. We can start to make changes to more public spaces so that people with dementia feel comfortable and confident in using them. And this can be through having more signage, having landmarks, thinking about colour contrast, and reducing noise levels. By rebooting people's perceptions of what dementia is, we'll create a more user-friendly and accessible environment that will not only benefit people with dementia, but will benefit the community as a whole. So, I would like you to go home and think about how you can implement some of these changes in Coventry. And this can be by breaking up some of those repetitive corridors that you have in your place of work. It can be by having more signage at work. For example, especially to and from the bathroom. Also, getting people with dementia involved in local projects and also in the design of your space. And supporting people with dementia who have recently received a diagnosis to continue with work. Or simply by spreading the word and making more people aware of what dementia is and that people with dementia can live well. I would like to end with a thought from a well-respected expert in this field, Professor Mary Marshall, who has emphasised that environments designed for people with dementia will result in well-designed environments for all. Thank you.